All right. My name is Matt McInerney. I'm the director of the Digital Scholarship Lab at Texas Tech University and the former chair of the Texas Data Repository Steering Committee. I'm pleased to welcome you to the next session in our series of webinars on topics in research data management. First, let me orient you to the Zoom platform if you've been absent during the entire pandemic. I'll go over what functionalities Zoom has. You can click on the participants to view the attendees. You can click on chat to enter questions or comments or DM other guests. And please keep your microphone and video muted for this webinar, but we will be taking all questions through the chat at the end of the presentation, and I'll be monitoring it throughout if you have something that you need to chat about. Next, I'll give a brief introduction to the Texas Data Repository, or the TDR. It is a multi-tenant Dataverse application launched by Texas Digital Libraries in late 2016. Dataverse is also an open source web application used to share, preserve, cite, explore, and analyze research data. There are 11 TDL member institutions who serve in the TDR steering committee, and they provide feedback and help make decisions on TDR services. And the purpose of the steering committee is to provide strategic planning support and policy oversight to ensure the focus and direction of our programs and services. The Texas Digital Library and the Texas Data Repository Steering Committee have presented this free webinar series since 2018, showcasing topics in research data management and hosted by experts in academic libraries throughout North America. And now we have Austria to add to that list. And you can follow the link on the slide to view previous webinars and slides. Before I hand things over to today's speaker, I want to remind everyone to please use the chat to ask your questions and leave comments. There will be time at the end for questions and answers. Alex and I will be monitoring the chat for any questions during the presentation, and we'll call attention to them at the end. But now I'd like to introduce Tomasz Miksa, senior researcher at SBA Research in Vienna, Austria, and he will be presenting today on machine actionable data management plans and data repositories.
Thank you very much for the introduction and also for the invitation to this webinar. Today I want to talk about two parts of this title. The first one are the machine actionable data management plans, abbreviated as MADMPs. And for those who are not familiar with them, I will explain what they are, why we actually need them, and who is using them. And then in the second part of this presentation, I'm going to explain how they can integrate with data repositories, and I will show a small example of how we did it with Dataverse, but I will also present other systems like Invenio RDMs and some general use cases which can be relevant for any repository system you may have. And the presentation will end with some summary and invitation for further collaboration. So let's start with the data management plans. And here in this slide, you can see an example of one of the checklists that research funders are asking researchers to fill out. I know that in the US context, you have National Science Foundation who is requiring the researchers to write a data management plan. In Europe, all major research agencies are also asking the researchers to write a data management plan when they are submitting a proposal or when the project was granted. The problem with data management plans is that this is a lot of text, a lot of writing, and very often researchers consider them as unnecessary. The quality of information is also very vague because there is a lot of questions asked. The researchers not always have the right preparation to answer questions ranging from metadata standards to licenses and long-term preservation. And this is something we observed at Research Data Alliance and in general with colleagues in this area. And we thought it would be great if we could include all stakeholders who have anything to do with the research data lifecycle in the process of preparing a data management plan. And here in this slide, you can see a typical process of creating a data management plan. And we added to this process stakeholders and systems who can act on their behalf to reduce the workload on the researchers, but also to make sure that all these experts are included at the right moment in time. Because if we have the right timing, we can really help the researchers. So we would like to avoid situations that researcher comes to, for example, research support 5 minutes before submission and asks, and now give me a data management plan. This is not what we are talking about here. So let's focus on the example, and let's start with the researcher. So the basic thing we need to get from the researcher is the information on what types of data and how much data she is going to create. So let's assume the researcher will tell us it's going to be 1 gigabyte of JPEG images, let's say a butterfly collection. And then based on this information, we can get information from the infrastructure operator, what would be the suitable storage for this collection and how much it will actually cost to keep these images during the project and after the project. Same is about the license. In many situations when researchers are asked to choose a license, they say, let the research support or library choose the license, and many universities have their policies in which they make a commitment to use open licenses. So for the majority of cases, it's very often CC BY or CC 0 license. And for majority of cases, with the famous 80-20 rule, we are able to automate this process and automatically suggest what would be best to go into such a DMP. And of course, the researcher must still be able to review the end result, maybe do some changes, but then they don't have to do it on the empty page, but have already some text to work with. And at the end, submit to the funder. And of course, by integrating the system that is preparing the DMP with the funder system, and not again exporting a PDF and sending it as an attachment to the email, and of course, very often forgetting to attach the attachment. Yeah. So this is what we want to evade. We want to automate the process. We want to make sure everyone is involved. But to be able to achieve this kind of automation, we need to change the way information is structured in data management plans, because currently the data management plans are modeling questionnaires. And here we have an example in the top of the slide. So even if they are allowing to export information to XML, JSON, so any formats you can parse, they are still formatted in the question answer manner. So here you have an example of who is the contact person for the DMP, and the answer is John Smith from our university. And on the lower part of this slide, we have the same information, but modeled in machine actionable way, meaning we have specific fields. We are using persistent identifier to differentiate from all John Smiths. We have exact information on the email address, and vague statement like our university, which is very often clear to the researchers, is now made specific because of the email address, or also we can get this information from the ORCID ID. So we want to change the way we describe the DMPs from question answer based templates to modeling the actual information. Only then we are able to automate the process and to make it possible for systems to reuse the information and make automated actions. And with this idea, we started in 2017 a working group at Research Data Alliance. For those who are not familiar with RDA, this is an international body which has several working groups, few thousands of participants, and it's a place to discuss all challenges in sharing research data. So it's a place where somebody who has a problem can come to talk to others, and if there is enough people who are sharing the same concern, a working group can be established to solve, to come up with a solution. And this is what happened in case of data management plans. As of today, we have 215 members, and within the last 3 years, we conducted a lot of open consultations to identify what actually should go into such a common standard to represent MADMPs. We also built some prototype software Last year, we had a very fruitful hackathon with participants from several countries in which we tested the recommendation, in which we tested this common way of describing machine actionable data management plans. And in 2020, we issued an official recommendation, which got endorsed by RDA, and it describes this standard, this common way of modeling information contained in DMPs. The standard itself consists of a set of fields. Here you can see an excerpt from the documentation. So there is a set of fields like the currency code or description or name, email, the description, cardinality, which is saying whether the field is obligatory or optional, and some example usage. And the list of fields is around, I don't know, 60, 70, and most of them are optional on purpose because we wanted to provide a common set of information that you can find in all cases when DMPs are used. So both National Science Foundation and Horizon 2020 and Science Europe and also African templates, basically everyone. And this is what we have identified as common, and specific constraints can be set at specific deployments. We have created a set of examples which can be found in our repository on GitHub. And this is how a minimal MADMP looks like. So here you can see that it has a title minimal DMP, a contact person, Charlie Chaplin, creation date, the identifier of the DMP itself, and then it has can have multiple data sets. And each data set also has its identifier, description, and indication whether it contains sensitive data, language, and modification dates. This is a minimal set of fields. There is way more fields, many more fields which can be added depending on the use case. So to sum up, the DMP common standard is to model information from standard DMPs. It's not a template, it's not a questionnaire, meaning it is not going to replace what, for example, National Science Foundation is asking for, but it's rather providing a way to exchange information between systems on contents of what National Science Foundation is asking for. Yeah, and we have here a lot of examples and serializations, JSON, RDF, whatever you need. So 3 years ago, we had only DMPs. Now we have the recommendation. What can we do with that? So we realized that MADMPs can be a central point to bring all the stakeholders together. And here is a simple example of a researcher who is creating a machine actionable data management plan. And the researcher may provide information on which repository will be used, can say that some of the data sets will have an embargo, and can specify what license is used. The repository operator who receives machine actionable DMP doesn't have to ask the researcher to provide this information directly in the repository system. This information can be read out from the MADMP. In return, the repository operator may provide information on the issued DOIs. So what DOIs were assigned to the data sets, or what DOIs were booked for the researcher that later will be used to publish the data sets, and can also provide real information on costs, so not only estimations, but actually how much it will cost to keep the data. This in turn can be sent to the funder, so the funder gets information on costs, on DOIs, and has higher confidence that the provided information is not just something that the researchers made up 10 minutes before the submission, but actually came from the expert in that area. We have a set of pending adoptions of the recommendation. So we have all major data management planning tools, like DMP tool that you might be familiar with in the US, the brother of DMP tool, DMP Online in Europe, Data Stewardship Wizard. We have also publishers like F1000 Research. There is also the first repository to implement fully MADMP's Haplo repository from London, and some other infrastructures built nationally in Europe, for example, in Austria, where I'm involved a lot, and also in Norway, where the DMPs are used to exchange specific information on data sets and projects between the systems. One of the adoption I'm familiar with in the US is in California. This is made mostly by led by the colleagues from University of California Digital Library. They have a project in which they have idealistic view on FAIR principles: findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And they want to build a system in which all research data, everything is tracked in one system from the very beginning using person identifiers, and MADMPs have a central role in this project. So if you want to learn more about how MADMPs are used there in this US specific context, please visit this website. But today, I want to focus on the integration with data repositories. And as I have tried to explain so far, MADMPs can be seen as a glue between systems. So integration with data repositories is one of the many use cases. There can be also integration with repository registries like Refree Data, OpenDOR. There can be integration with environments where the data is processed or where the code is also kept. And also CRIS systems like ORCID or anything that your university has to keep information on the researchers. And of course, funders, this is another integration. But today we focus on integration with repository systems. So how can we exchange information from DMPs to make the life of repository operators easier, and what in turn the repository operators can provide to DMPs so that others can reuse this information. So we developed a prototype for integration for Dataverse. There was a presentation also in the Dataverse community meeting in June 2020 on this topic. And we have came up with two basic use cases. The first use case was that we have information in the MADMP, and we wanted to show how much we can automate filling in information on the Dataverse site so that there is less thing to provide manually. And this is something that happens at the beginning of a project. So when the researcher still doesn't have the data, it's saying, okay, I'm gonna produce these data sets, these types of data, when the researcher is setting up space where the data will be collected. And then there is a second use case in which we considered what happens at the end of the project. So the data was already uploaded to Dataverse, the data is already there, but the researcher must do the reporting to the funder. And then we want to extract this information from Dataverse, put into the MADMP and send it to the funder. Now I would like to show you in detail how it works in Dataverse. So the first thing that you have to do, this is just a proof of concept. So this is not a system that went in production, but this was just to prove how this can be done. So the first step is to create a placeholder data set. So this is basically, here you can write anything. We just simply want to use this functionality of triggering an automated workflow during publishing when you upload something to Dataverse. So you create a placeholder data set, and then you upload a data management plan. In this case, it was a JSON file to Dataverse, and click the publish button. And once you click the publish button, the magic happens. And instead of having our placeholder data set, we have 4 data sets created. So here you can see produced data, source code, marriages in Austria and the EU, and students on public universities in Austria. So these are 4 data sets that were described by the data management plan. And this information on who is the author, what is the title of the data set, what is the license, was taken from the data management plan. This is how it looks like now when you click on a specific data set. So there are still no files. You still have to upload the files on your own, of course, because this was the beginning of the project. So during the project, as you collect the data, you will be uploading individual files in here. The second use case, as we said, was about exporting information. So here you can see an example where there were 2 Python scripts uploaded to Dataverse, and using the functionality to include the extensions into Dataverse by clicking this Explore button, we were able to generate a JSON conform to the recommendation specification so that we can send it to the funder later. And this is what we did, I think, like 2 years ago with the Dataverse. And then we thought, okay, let's try to do it also for the other systems. This is also related to the fact that in Austria at that time, universities like Vienna University of Technology and Graz University of Technology didn't know which platform to choose. And at some point there was a decision to use also Invenio RDM. And then here you can find links to a small webinar by Sotiris Tsepalakis, who showed how to do that, the same use cases in Invenio RDM. And also a team from TU Graz made such an integration with a prototype of a tool for creating data management plans. And this is something I want to show in the next 2 slides. So basically the team from Graz thought of how can they transfer information from a DMP tool, which is used by the researchers of the university to write data management plan, to populate information in their data repository. So here you can see an example that there is a project in which there is a data set called Research Output Management for Open Access Repositories in Palestine. There is some description and information on the funding. And then the same information is on the data set created in the Invenio RDM repository, so including the author, title, keywords, description. So this is a little bit different what we had before with Dataverse, because this time there was integration with the DMP tool, which the university also operates. So the university has two systems, data repository and tool for creating data management plans. And as a follow-up to this work, our colleague Maximilian Moser, who is a very talented developer, he said, let's make this even more generic, because we had some tests on Dataverse and Invenio, but let's open it up to other repositories, and let's define common rules of the game so that everyone can use it, and let's put some more constraints on the communication protocols and how to implement it, because the 2 previous examples I gave you was to convince people that this is feasible, that this makes sense and is useful to the researchers. And once we passed this line, we wanted to focus on the details of how such a communication could look like. And for example, whether we need to authorize tools, and whether the repository should decide to push an update, or maybe it should be the DMP tool. And this was not clear, and this is what Max worked on. And again, he defined use cases that we believe are common for any repository system. So in this case, the first use case is on automatic creation of deposit drafts. So again, here we have any DMP tool, any tool for creating DMPs on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side, you have any data repository system. And this mapping of data sets is something we can really use a lot in the area of data repositories. So in this case, you can see that the license, the information on the host, the information on the size of the files, as well as description, can be put into the data repository. The second use case we had was in the other direction. So user uploaded the data into the repository, and then he's or she is asked whether they want to report this data set for a specific project, for a specific data management plan, and then this information on the data set is automatically sent to the DMP tool, which is managing the data management plan. And then the user can add information to the data management plan. And the third use case we have is to synchronize information. So when the actual data is already in the repository and maybe there is a newer version uploaded, and whether we want to push an update also to the DMP that it points to the newest version, and then there is an update. So these were the three use cases. And here's some technical details. So there was a discussion whether we should be sending a JSON or the JSON patch. So it's mostly realized as the REST communication. Only authorized tools can participate. So it's also possible to authenticate other and authorize other tools. And the versioning of the DMP is done by the DMP tool. So the repository is only responsible for sending updates or receiving the updates, while the whole logic of maintaining the different versions should be with the DMP tool. This is what we have in the specification. This is described in these documents. I hope that the slides will be made available to you after the presentation so that you can explore specific links. These use cases is still a work in progress, so there are still some small details we need to find out. So if you would like to contribute to it, you are more than welcomed. And I said in the previous slide that MADMPs can be used as a glue for different settings. So we are not only working on data repositories as the Research Data Alliance, but we are also focusing on this funder integration, and currently we are doing a mapping of MADMPs to funder templates. So we would like to have, for example, one way of expressing the NSF template in a machine actionable way. We want to have one way of expressing it for the research funder in Austria, Belgium, or Portugal. And we are looking for people who are willing to do such a mapping between the recommendation and the specific funder requirements. Another very interesting topic, which is followed by Claire Austin from Canada, is using MADMPs in the governmental context. This is maybe very specific to Canada because the way different research agencies are organized under the Canadian government, but she believes that this may be also applicable to other countries. So maybe this is also relevant and interesting to you. In case it is, please contact Claire or ask me as well. If anything that I said sounds anyhow interesting to you and you would like to stay in touch and actually contribute actively, you can always sign up to the RDA Working Group. So we have two groups. We have an interest group on DMPs, which is covering all topics related to data management plans. And we have the working group that is focusing mostly on this recommendation I was presenting today. So any maintenance, if you have any adoption stories, or if you don't know whether you want to adopt it or not, please contact me or any of the chairs who are here listed in this slide. So to conclude, common standard for machine actionable DMPs is a way to exchange information between systems, is to make sure that we are able to include all stakeholders involved in research data management lifecycle whenever they are needed. It can reduce workload on researchers, but also for the repository operators and other stakeholders. And data deposit can be simplified and automated, and the reporting of what has happened in the data repository can also be simplified. If you want to learn more on what we did, this is a list of publications we have. So here you can learn about how we came up with the recommendation and how to build in general an environment in which the MADs can be used. We also have a paper on how finding a repository with the help of MADMPs can be implemented. To stay in touch, as I said, please sign up to the working groups, active group, or you can always reach me directly by mail or on Twitter. Thank you very much for your time, and I'm looking forward to questions.
I just want to reassure you, everyone, too. I said this in chat, but we will absolutely share these slides. So, Tomasz, if you could just send them to me, Alex, and Matt afterwards, we'll share them in the Texas Data Libraries repository, along with the link to the YouTube with the closed captioning.
Okay.
That was absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm going to hand over, Matt, to you to lead the Q&A. So if anyone's got a question, feel free to go ahead and drop it in the chat, and Matt will start us off.
Sure. Tomasz, have you gotten any feedback from researchers that have tried this out?
We haven't worked directly with researchers because, wrong. This is not yet in the live environment. So we have presented it in several working groups with people, like today. In general, their feedback was, yes, that's great, but we never had a really chance to test it in the production, if this is what you're asking.
Gotcha. All right, we're just waiting for other questions here.
It looks like Jessica was going to ask the same question.
Same thing.
So I think a lot depends on the context that you have and your funders, what they are pushing you to do and to write. I don't know how it is in your environment in Texas, for example. Who are the main policymakers?
Yeah, that would be all the federal agencies, NSF, NIH. And they have different formats of their data management policies. So like with NSF, you have a data management plan, but with NIH, you have a data sharing plan. And sometimes their formats can be different, and what they require will be different as well. Christina asked, do you have a timeline for the production, or will that depend on having a repository to adopt it?
Yes, because I have a dual role. So on the one hand, I was presenting to you today as a chair of the working group where we developed the nice concepts and did all the prototyping. But on the other hand, in Austria, we have a Fair Data Austria project in which I am responsible for implementing a data repository for Technical University in Vienna, but also implementing the tool for MADMPs. So actually, TU is going to adopt this, and we're going to put it into production by the end of 2021. And TU Graz and University of Vienna are also going to follow. So basically, the plan is to roll it out at Austrian universities. We've been also in touch with the Austrian funder, and they are also supporting that deployment. So of course, in this means the project is bigger because the project is going to run for 2 years. But what I have described today is part of the features we will be implementing.
Awesome. Christina also asked, at Baylor, they're generally direct researchers to use the DMP tool from the California Digital Library. So you are working with them to developing a machine actual DMP
Yes.
For them? Okay.
Yes, definitely. They are the how we call it, the godfather of the working group. So basically, we started these discussions with them and John or Stephanie Sims earlier. Now Maria Pretzelis, they were all involved in that. Cool.
Matthew Arp asks, what skills or contributions are you looking for from those interested in this project?
So there is always a wide range of skills we're looking for because on the one hand, we need simply developers who can talk HTTP and REST and who are willing to discuss details of the communication. On the other hand, we are looking for people who are able to read this documentation like metadata standards and read the funder templates to find the mapping, to identify, for example, that the question can be answered by providing information in these 2 or 3 fields of the recommendation. So it can be anything who is a librarian, I guess, and also a software developer. yeah, so there are no limits, I would say.
Cool. Anybody else? Jessica asks, have any of your use cases looked at complexities of sharing sensitive data?
So in general, the recommendation has a field to indicate whether there is sensitive data there. And one of the use cases we have that we want to implement as kind of a check is that if someone indicates in a data management plan that they are going to handle sensitive data, and then someone is trying to upload the data into the data repository and make it open and give it a CC BY license, we want to find out and say, are you really sure you want to put sensitive data into the open repository? And I know that this mechanism has already been implemented by the Haplo repository, which was mentioned as one of the adopters. So in this way, we have this use case.
Gotcha. Anna has asked, is there any buyback from funders to use this for reporting back? And by reporting back, she means showing compliance with their data management plans, particularly where they have published data sets.
Mm-hmm. So with funders, I had a presentation for Science Europe, which is an association of all research funders in Europe. I was presenting to them last week. And basically, the feedback was very positive, but they were asking, show us a specific tool, a specific product. So as our role as LDA is not to develop specific tool products, we are not here to sell stuff. We are to bring community together to build things. So in this way, they were a bit disappointed that there is nothing yet they can use. But they didn't tell us, forget about it, we don't want it. They realized that by providing data management plans and requiring them from researchers, they took a lot of work on themselves and they are not really able to assess the quality and find out what really happened. So they are really happy to shift the responsibility towards the universities who are supporting the researchers in writing the DMP. And they would like to see kind of a stamp of approval from the university saying that this has been checked with the researcher and what is sent in the end to the funder is already of good quality. And the MADMPs actually improve the communication at the university side. So that's why the funders said, okay, this is a really nice thing to do. I hope this answers the question.
Yeah. Anna said maybe they'll fund you to make it for them.
Excuse me?
Anna said maybe they'll pay you to make it for them, make the tool for them.
I hope.
Awesome. Anybody else? All right. Well, thank you so much for the presentation. Let's go over here. And thank you to the TDL and the TDR Steering Committee for coordinating the Topics and Research Data webinar series. Many thanks to Tomasz for coming out and presenting at this time of day or night. Have a great day, everyone. And if you, these slides will be on the TDL repository.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Tomasz.